All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us on this new venture on an early Wednesday morning. We're here with my co-host Landon and from Mitchell Hamlin's Center for Law and Business, John Sonsteng. I wonder if you guys might each quickly just introduce yourself. And first, thank you for joining us here. Landon, because this is brand new and we're doing this for the first time. I wonder if you might just quickly tell us a little bit about yourself quickly.
My name's Landon Ashman. I do criminal defense throughout the state of Minnesota. That's pretty much it that I actually do for a job. But the vast majority of my extra stuff tends to be working with the bar associations, MSBA, HCBA, and RCBA, just trying to keep all the lawyer communities connected and keep people going.
And John, you're the director of the Center for Law and Business over at Mitchell Hamline, but you've been engaged over at Mitchell Hamline for many years. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, I'm using my wife's computer. That's why I'm coming up with Stan. I've been at Mitchell for over 40 years. I was a Dakota County attorney before that. I've been teaching skills courses, practicums, advanced advocacy, criminal law, and I run a London program. And this is very exciting. Was allowed to take over or work with the Center for Law and Business 2 years ago. And we're working with a tremendous group of students and lawyers as faculty and as idea people to see how we can make the Center for Law and Business something that's really quite unusual.
Great, thanks for that. So we did got over on the right-hand side of the screen here, just a quick look at our agenda, what we'll be covering for today. And John, do you want to just kick us off with a little description about what you mean about futurists in the practice of law?
Yes, sir. Over the last 20 years, we've been, students and a team of us have been doing research on what people are saying about the practice of law. And it's quite remarkable. Right from the beginning, people were critical of the legal education system and not preparing people for the practice. And with Michael, in the last year, we've conducted research in Minnesota about lawyers' opinions of how well prepared they were coming out of law school and where they learned their skills. So we're focusing on the business of law, not the general practice skills, but the business of law. And Michael can describe the research, but the futurists are talking about the major changes that are going to come to legal practice, but they're not telling us how to do it. So what we did is, with the students at the law school, stepped back and said, how in the world can we be better prepared? And then how can we use the experience of our alumni and people practicing to make us better lawyers when we come out, so we're ready to practice. So Michael, why don't you talk about the research?
Yeah, and I just want to first ask, I'll cover, these are some visualizations that are the result of a survey we did. I wanted to quickly ask, though, you've been doing these surveys for well before my time even, and this followed on sort of advancing or improving on, I guess, the old McCrate report. For folks who aren't familiar with that, I wonder if it might be helpful to describe what the old McCrate report was and how this differs from that.
Well, in the late 1900s, in the 1990s, there's a lot of research and studies on law school training and the preparation of lawyers and what skills are important. And a guy named McCrate did major surveys. So we started in '99. Surveying Minnesota lawyers, and did surveys in '99 and 2013 and again in 2018-19 to see if we could replicate the surveys. And what we found out, there was 17 legal practice skills, and that law schools were relevant in about either 5 or 6 of them. And the rest of them, the people's studies show that the lawyers got their training on their own experience. So we thought, well, gosh, it's that law schools are not relevant in these critical areas. What do we do? And we developed a paper called the Legal Education Renaissance, a way to develop a plan. And in fact, because of the coronavirus and because of going to online training, we're doing lots of the things that the McCrate report said we should be doing, and trying to provide better education. This latest study that Michael and I worked on is on the legal practice skills. That's what worries us because, and I'm going to jump a little bit, but we found that over half of the people coming out of law school go into either small practice, 10 or under, or in business. So that tells us that they've got to be better prepared to do the business of practice law. And they also have to understand how to practice law and the business part of it in order to advise small businesses on what to do in their business. So even though we had over 50% of our courses, and that's around the country, 50% of the courses in law school are business related, they're listed alphabetically on the law school's websites. So students can't really pick and decide how things work together. So based on the research, and Michael, if you go back and show us that research, we do research on the skills. Why don't you show us? Why don't you go through that, Michael? I'll show you how we organized it.
Sure. So the survey, so the legal practice skills and then the managerial skills were included. And we selected for these visualizations just a handful of those skills just to highlight the differences. What you're seeing here in the red is ranked importance. So 1 being not at all important, and 7 having the perception being very important. And then the blue indicates, the blue bars indicate how well prepared students felt they were prepared to perform those skills at graduation. So with something like ability in legal analysis and reasoning, you see sort of the same track. You've seen the same arc. Red. Majority of folks feeling that, of course, it's very important, as a critical legal skill, and for the most part, students felt like they were prepared upon graduation to perform that skill. So you see the same arc here between the red and the blue. Not so with some of the managerial business related skills. You see more of a gap between the red and the blue. So for example, the organization and management of legal work, obviously very, very important. The majority of folks who responded said that was, critically important, but very, very few said that they were prepared to perform those skills upon graduation. You can see it's grouped quite heavily down from 4 and below. If we scroll down a little bit, this most, I think the ability to obtain and keep clients is where you see the biggest crossing of the paths here between the red and the blue. Critically important for a majority of the folks who responded, but you have the opposite, clearly the opposite arc, with the majority of saying they were not at all prepared upon graduation to perform that critical legal skill. So if they're not getting it from their law school curriculum, where are folks acquiring these skills? And I welcome folks to chime in on chat too on any comments on any of these visualizations. But we also asked what their primary source of for these particular skills. Here we shaded the sort of the legal skills in differently than the business related skills. Law school curriculum, clearly for the ability to perform legal reasoning. Law school curriculum for a majority was their primary source. But for each of the others, it was either their own experience, advice from other attorneys, or observation of other lawyers. And you can see that for each of these, whereas law school curriculum fits into one of these smaller categories at the bottom here. Marketing and client development, I'm not sure I can even get law school curriculum, very, very low on the totem here. And so, perhaps not, incredibly surprising, but it does confirm that these are skills that are, that we're not teaching ourselves. So what is the, if they're critical legal skills, is that something that the Bar Association should be picking up as, is that our role, or is that something that the law school curriculum should pick up, or what exactly does that balance look like? And it's something that is part of this conversation.
Well, because people are coming out of law school now, going into small firms, we think that they have to be ready to do it and be valuable to their clients and valuable to the firms. And if they are in business, they've got to understand both the legal part of the business. So we are doing some things at the law school to help develop that. Plus, we understand that they have to have a partnership between law schools, law students, and the bar and practitioners. So we are expanding our Center for Law and Business and trying to make it a national resource. So you'll see on the bottom the comment on what we're going to do today is talk about the open resource model, but we'll get to that in a bit. So you can see in the 7 management skills, law schools are not relevant. And we've got, I think, Michael, you had over 1,600 responses of lawyers in practice all over Minnesota. And we have much more detail on the study. This confirms our study in 2013 and the study in 1999. So we have had the same, for over 20 years, exactly the same results in our surveys. So we haven't made the kind of changes we need to make in order to make lawyers more effective upon graduation. So Michael, do you want to, we think that in order for students, lawyers to be able to advise clients who are in business, and we remember over half the courses are in business. Most of what we do is business related, unless you're doing criminal defense, but there's lots of business in that. You've got to understand how to run your office, the business of your office, in order to do successful legal practice. So for more than 15 years, both Hamline Law School and Mitchell have had a Center for Law and Business, or the Business Law Center from Hamline. And the idea of it was that started by a bunch of alumni from both schools, recognizing how important business was. And so the centers developed over 10 years ago. 2 years ago, I was able to take it over, was asked to, and I the privilege to do it. And with a bunch of students, we really reorganized the Center for Law and Business. So the goal was students, when they graduate from law school, would have the experience to both practice the business of law and the business of advising businesses. So we organized a sort of a company. Michael, do you want to drop down on them? There it is. So the Center for Law and Business chart, we try to organize it as almost like a corporation. So the dean, associate dean, the executive director, which is me right now, and plus a woman named Willow Anderson, who's a practicing lawyer in the cities here. And then student engagement and partners. Now, if you look at this, we want to engage students at all levels of their education, and we want to engage them with partners. And that means people who have been out in practice. So we in the Center for Law and Business have this partnership between our students and our and alumni. We're trying to expand that nationally. After the coronavirus leaves us, we're going to do that. We're sort of putting in a hiatus at the point now. So what we did with the students, we had a bunch of students working on this to develop this managerial chart, and they've done a terrific job. One of the things we did is we wrote to all the law schools in the country saying, what are you doing? What are you doing in terms of business and teaching about the business of the practice of law? We've got pretty good response. About 14 or 15 of the law schools have well-developed programs, but because it was a Survey Monkey survey and people get so many questionnaires, we didn't get this response that we hoped we would get. A lot of them, the law school said, please refer to our website, but we expect to expand that. But we looked at what they're doing and we said, we can make our Center for Law and Business better, and we can do more with it to help our students be better prepared. So we developed this business structure. The Business Law Society is a student organization which takes the leadership under the student engagement. We have courses now in our curriculum, right from the first year, business lawyer as a business owner. We have the Dispute Resolution Institute. We have courses on disputes and doing deals and disputes. And then we have some practicum courses, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But if you go on, we also then developed with the students a planning guide so the students could figure out how to take this courses. If you go back up a little bit, elective courses that are listed on all, right there's all websites of all the law schools. They're listed alphabetically. And so we thought, how in the world could students figure out what to take with this alphabetical listing? So we organized them with some of our deans and faculty and the law students and organized them into this structure. So we have a practical experience required. We have required courses that they have to take: business organizations, lawyers and business owner, transactions and settlements, commercial law surveys. We have a planning guide, which we have externships and clinics and practicums. And then we have this listed by different areas of practice. So for instance, if people are interested in doing general counsel, here's the courses they can take. These are not focus areas. These are not concentrations. These are just helping the students figure out what they can take to help them achieve their goals. Landon, do you have any comments you want to add to that? Or?
Well, I guess a few questions that I have kind of going through this. One of them is, this is a great compilation of kind of the different programs, but for an individual like myself, I had never planned on running my own business. I had never planned on doing any business work while I was in law school. You know, my plan was essentially to work for the government and either do prosecution or defense in some way, shape, or form. I never imagined that I would be starting Ashman Law or Ashman and Smith immediately upon graduation. I know that you talked a little bit about connecting the students to alumni who are already out and doing things. What about the students that have just transitioned over to being lawyers and suddenly find that, you know, they're in this predicament? Is there any assistance that's being given to those students?
Yes, if you look down at the bottom, and I'll just, we call it an open resource. I think the Bar Association has been ahead of us, because the bar has open source training, right? Michael, you want to talk about your open source, what you have?
Well, yeah. So,
sorry, I'm jumping ahead for you.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's good. Yeah.
Landon's right. I mean, and I think part of the curriculum change is setting some reasonable expectations about, you know, where you're going to be at graduation. You know, because there's that disjunct that's happening right now, I think bar associations across the country, you know, they all have, including the state bar, you know, practice management advisors. They have a practice management section, and so the bar associations are picking up some of that work. I think we've also got, you know, great members who recognize this need. I'm thinking of, you know, Jess Birkin and Matthew Lute, the chair of the practice management section, who I've seen give presentations on how to run your business, how to deal with employees. I saw Matt Lute at the ABA Tech Conference in Chicago before we were all locked down, give a really great presentation on keeping your employees motivated and engaged, and I mean, it was great. But it's up to our members really to take on that role. And so, yeah, I did bring up the practice developers community here because John was going to chat about the open resource tool, which I'm eager to talk about. We have an open source developers community here where our members will put together forms, checklists, contracts, all kinds of things in a open source community here in the communities at my.minbar.org. Most of that activity takes place here, where they'll jump in, and folks who are part of this community can work on any one of these projects. These are all just shared documents typically. I've got a cabin trust here. I like this one because it was a Mitchell Hamline student and an attorney member who developed this thing. But anyone can jump in here and edit this document. They can copy it and make it their own. They can edit it however they wish. It's truly an open source environment. And so I like that model as a way of getting development done where typically it wouldn't get done. And that's the only reason why I bring it up. I think it's interesting to see Mitchell Hamline also taking on what they're calling an open resource model. I think they could probably get away with, based on its its fundamental structure, I think they could get away with calling it an open source model. But do you want to tell us a little bit about what that open resource feature is?
I will. You know, you also have the solo and small business, small practice sections of the bar, which are really critical. Our students don't know about that stuff. So what we've done is we didn't want to do a law review article. We wanted to write a ever-changing sort of fluid kind of document that we've now developed through what's a program called Canvas. And it's got five parts. The first one is the research part. And that is anybody can add their own research to it. So any research or papers that they want to write, people can write academic pieces or non-academic pieces. We can take articles. That'll be published regularly. We're only going to screen them for just for correctness, not spelling, but if there isn't any porn on it. So the research, we're going to continue to add what other law schools are going to be doing. We are going to continue to add our other research on preparation coming out of law school, because we think the practicing lawyers need to have students coming out of law school who are ready to do it, not people who have to be trained for another couple of years. And Landon, I went into criminal prosecution. I had no idea, no expectation that I would be running an office. I got to be county attorney. I didn't have a clue. I mean, about management and organization and sexual harassment policies and retirement and unions. And I just got thrown into this as a politician and was just blown away about what I did not know. Well, and the last part is what we call the open resource. And Michael is right. We started calling it open source, and then we had certain people criticize us because they said, well, that only dealt with computer programming, open source, so we're not going to do that. And they, you know, hanging around a law school, you're going to find somebody who's going to find a problem with most everything. So we've changed the title to open resource. And then we have partnerships. So the first thing we're going to do is, as soon as we get off this lockdown, we're going to invite people from all over the country, lawyers and business. So we're going to have business partners, we're going to have lawyer partners, we're going to have law student partners, because only through partnerships and collaboration can we grow. We can't wait till there's a CLE. We can't wait to hope the students will know about when they come out, but we have to have this collaboration between all of the people who are engaged in this law business. So we have partners, collaborations. It's not a money-making thing. It's no ownership, no membership drive, nothing. Just anybody can pop in and be a part of it. And that means that it will be available to students to communicate with people all over the country, or in professions or in businesses, to talk about their journey, collaborations with ideas. We have two courses called the Business Practicum and the Regular Practicum, because we felt that you can't lecture or give tests on this experience. So we have courses in which students are formed into two-person law firms and do all the things a lawyer does. But they can experiment, they can fail. This is in addition to clinics, because in clinics, one of the problems is you can't experiment. You can't fail because you've got clients. But in a practicum, everything's fake or simulated, and students can take chances and take risks. So we have them do marketing. We have letters, client retention. We have representation agreements. We have briefs. We have letters to clients. We have the billings, and the students get critiqued by it. They get feedback, and all of their writing, they have a grid that they get feedback on. They can redo something. So if they don't do very well, and they can redo it again, because it's about learning. It's not about grading students. It's about success and coming out of law school, being prepared. So the students do very well, but if a student doesn't do well on a certain portion, the student can rewrite it. And then all of us on our team, our teaching team, are available. I'm available 24/7. They have my phone number. They can call me anytime. I joke, if you're sober, you can call me. But by being able to do it by calling me up and saying, I'm struggling with this representation agreements, how can I fix it? What can I do better? They submit documents to me in advance. I can give them feedback. And so when they get their final documents, they're much better. If I don't know the answer, I can find another member of our teaching team, like what Landon is doing. One of the things he's doing the same kind of teaching, but this is a more advanced collaboration and practicum. And we called it practicum. We've been doing our practicum since, almost 40 years, because I've been there 40 years. So it's been there about 38 years we've been doing this practicum, and it's very well received by the students, ranks actually higher than typical classes. And we did a cost model, and we found that we can do this kind of teaching at a cost about the same cost as delivering to a class of 40 people by a full-time faculty member. And it provides that kind of experience that students can't get anywhere else. So we're hoping that when they take these courses, and they really are enthusiastic about it, they'll be better prepared coming out of law school, either to practice, either do business, or to work in a small firm.
And I just want to chime in here with a little bit of chat, because I want to make sure that people are getting their voice out there. Karen Ciano ended up chatting a little bit ago, talking about the differences between general counsel and small firm management. Given the limited time and credits, how are students to figure out which path to take? Some of the things that have been, of course, suggested is the MSBA solo small section, also practice management section, although I believe the two are considering combining or have combined. I'm not tracking that that section change there. Also, of course, Karen works with I think she's still working with the Collaborative Community Law Initiative, CCLI, which Mitchell's also working with. So those are other options. But to kind of get to the question, how are we helping the students figure out which direction they should be going or considering going, or assisting them in that decision-making process?
Well, I had no idea where I was going. I don't really know right now, but in the business practicum, when the question about general counsel, we tried to have a practicum exercise, a small business. So the lawyers are actually general counsel to a very small business. So instead of having a large and big mergers and acquisitions with Honeywell, we take it down to the small business owner, where the lawyers become general counsel, and provide them the experience to working with that small business, so they can see what it's like to work with a small business in all areas. And we've been able to, as we meet with them in their classes twice a week, they are talking through what they want to do. They're surprised that these are these things. So we bring in people from Target who do risk analysis, so we can talk as a lawyer to a person who's got her own bakery and wants to buy a new oven. So instead of just doing the contract, you talk with her about the risk analysis and how much is the electricity going to cost, and what the training for it, and what fire extinguishers, fire suppressions do you have to have, how many loaves of bread do you have to bake in order to pay for this equipment. So we're doing that in the business practicum. And again, just talking, we bring in people who are entrepreneurs, doing their own businesses, talking about how they achieved it. And then our students get to work with them in developing their own work with the woman that we have as the fake client, developing her own environmentally friendly sporting goods store.
And one follow-up to that, because I think one of the issues that law schools always get hit on is the theory that it doesn't actually prepare you for the practice of law. I think practicum is generally considered different. I'm very thankful that although I didn't take practicum, my business partner, when we got started, had taken practicum from you. Grant Smith was thankfully an alumni of your class. And when we started up the law firm, he was able to say, here's some things that I learned, here's some things that we're looking at, bring in some of the curriculum from that class. And because this is over a decade ago, I'm trying to remember specifics. How much real world practice is there? I mean, do you have the students say that they're forming up a business in Minnesota, put the documents together, the official documents that they would for the state of Minnesota? Or is it still kind of within a closed world?
No, well, we're developing it now, so that next December will be, or next January, we'll be offering it so you can do it online. So we'll be doing like firms, we'll have partners here in Minnesota and people in Missouri practicing together as partnerships. We have a course in London that we have a small business program, where a developer, entrepreneur from Minnesota or from the US wants to partner with someone from England, and they have a environmentally friendly camping stove that's really good for third world developing countries. And how do you set up a business? And I raised my kids in Cannon Falls, and there were 6 businesses in Cannon Falls that did international business. So instead of having to go up to Minneapolis to a big firm, the lawyers could understand what are the issues in developing a relationship between the small business in Minnesota or Tennessee and in London. So we have lost teachers from Britain and Denise Roy, Jim Hilbert, Leanne Futh, who are terrific teachers, work together to show the differences and similarities between the two businesses and how to make it work together. So it's all practical and it's all scalable, which is, we thought you can't just do it if you have to have just 3 or 4 students. So it's all set in blocks of 2. Classes can go from 2 large classes with 60 people back to small groups, So they, like for instance, they argue a non-compete argument before a judge. Now so there's 4 people, 2 against 2. They argue a non-compete. They argue a disbarment before the Court of Appeals, but we have people from the State Board of Professional Responsibility acting as appellate judges. So it's real stuff. It's fake, but it's real. And what's fun about it is the students, once they're into it about a week, they don't realize it's fake anymore. They're very serious about it. And then of course, at the end, they have to submit bills to their clients. We then have them analyze how much time they spent and how much money they made or lost, because they can't write a short memorandum. They don't know how to write short and fast. So we have them always write a 4-page memorandum to the senior partner. So they have to write and analyze something right from the beginning. Sometimes they spend 12, 14 hours on a 4-page memo because they've never had to write short and fast. They realize that they can't live like that, so they're banging them out in a couple hours now. Of course, that 4-page memo to a senior partner drives the course all the way through, that exercise all the way through, because they start from the beginning rather than waiting till the end to figure it out. So it's all.
Do you have the clients respond back that they're only paying half the bill?
Yeah. Well, we do have the clients sometimes question the bills. The clients are played by our faculty, so there's always someone there that will respond to it and give them feedback and write back and say, wait, how can you charge me $285 an hour for this? Yes, we do respond. Yeah.
Angela's saying there should be a class called Writing Bad Newsletters in the first year, covering demand, cease and desist, replenish your retainer, or lose your lawyer letters as a required first-year course.
There is so many course things we should add to this. You're right. We started with a whole spread of things we wanted to do, but it was too much. So we had to do sort of a mini practice. We don't want to do something huge. Like we're doing a thing called with the National Science Foundation on a weather modification program. So we started out with the problem with the flooding in Greenland and tried to figure it out. And we ended up having somebody do cloud seeding in Montana, because you could take something large and move it down to micros so the students could manage it. And of course, the same issues apply to something small as to something big. So now we're doing like a small town fracking exercise. Well, and that's a big, big thing, but you make it small, one small fracking person doing sand frack, and take the same issues for a small practice to, you could take to a big company.
And this is probably a question for both John and Mike. What are some ways that Mitchell Hamline and the MSBA can collaborate to try to make sure these resources get out to students and new lawyers?
Michael, any comments? Because he and I have been talking about this a lot.
Just putting you on the spot.
No, I think we have to collaborate. And so part of the open resource in the Center for Law and Business is we are working with the Minnesota Bar Association to collaborate both on the open resource, on employment for students writing things, doing research. Mike, you've got people doing research for your open source materials. And then we want to have collaboration between lawyers all over the country. I don't think we have to, we can't wait. We've got to work together because things are changing so fast. Just in the last 2 weeks, our lives have changed enormously, and the practice of law has changed because we're doing meetings like this. I met with our students last night, a student group in the business practicum. We had on the general practice practicum. We met last night to talk about issues of using this meeting method and what do we put in backgrounds. Am I going to put my Hawaiian beach? If we're going to do an oral argument, do I want to put a courtroom behind me? What my map, my fake antiques in back? I mean, how do we set the scene? How do we do it? How do we communicate? How do we get as somebody said earlier, how do we see the tells when you have someone who's nervous? Because I can't see whether Landon's moving his feet or jumping around. So I can't tell because he's using it very well, but I'm not. So I'm struggling with it. I find it amazing. And the students are really, really on. They understand it, but they're very concerned about what their life as lawyers is going to be. I think it's the most exciting time to be a lawyer. I wish I was starting out again because I would love to do it. I have hung out in Coco and Impact Hub and watched what the young entrepreneurs are doing. And there's so much going on out there, and they don't have lawyers, so they don't trust lawyers. We're thinking about putting not a clinic, but putting students in there. We're working with the former Coco when we can meet again, is having our students meet with young entrepreneurs and be there available to them to decide where they need a lawyer, where they can go, and what's going to cost them, where they can't take chances by starting a business so they don't fail, like with the problem with Uber might have had because they weren't prepared in advance for the expansion. So we're working on that.
Yeah, I think the same thing. I often think I wish I could take the practicum again because I'd get to play with all of the new tools that are available. I'd love to do a redo. I hate to be a buzzkill here, but I gotta paste in the CLE event code. And I just, we've got a half a credit applied for here. Folks are welcome to hang on if they want. Otherwise, you've fulfilled your obligation. But any final thoughts from the panel?
The only thing I'm thinking is that when we started out with this Center for Law and Business, we were going to write a law review article. And then we realized no one would read it because no one does. Read it just once. We didn't want to have something just be published and then sit out there. What we want to have is this growing fluid kind of thing that would allow people to continue to add to it. We realized we couldn't do it alone, so partnerships and collaboration are critical. So Michael and I have been working on this for 2 years. Well, I couldn't do the survey myself. I had to work with the Minnesota Bar Association survey. And I look at what MSBA is doing, it's terrific. And so by getting our students understanding what lawyers are doing and having them understand what the bar can provide to them as young lawyers is so important.
I guess my thoughts are, now that I've been in for over a decade doing this work, it's not where I saw myself back in law school. As soon as I graduated, everything took a completely different direction. And I think that happens to a lot of law students. I think one thing that I've tried to do is reach out to students, reach out to new lawyers, or reach out to just attorneys that are switching professions and switching over from one practice area to maybe being solo small or switching over to criminal defense. And try to make sure that I know what resources are out there so that I can pass those along to people that are finding themselves in a new situation. So while I think it's great that the MSBA has these resources out there, they're not being used unless we know about them and unless we provide that information. We as attorneys provide that information to the law students, provide that information to the new lawyers or the people switching practice. So I think it's on all of us to be aware of what's out there and try to help our fellow lawyers by making sure they know what else is out there.
Well, I talk to a lot of lawyers and small firms around the state, and they really need lawyers coming out of law school who are ready to do it, who understand not the theory of contracts or torts, but understand the business of running a law firm, because there's not enough time to train people. They've got to be ready to go. And our students they're ready to go. They really want to practice law.
And of course, Karin giving another plug for CCLI. Of course.
Yeah. Karin, you should join us as a guest for one of these events. I think a separate discussion about what CCLI does and what those business plans are beginning to look like, especially when you consider that they're required to dedicate a portion of their practice to low bono or limited scope representations. Love to do that with you.
I just met with one of our students by phone. She lives in Nashville, and she is.
I think the mic might have cut out on you for a second, John.
Yeah, am I there now? You got me?
Yep, they are.
She worked in Nashville, and she's got a residency working with poverty law, and the people can't afford to even take a bus to get legal advice, but now they're using things like Zoom to give legal advice to people, which they couldn't have done before. That's changed just in the last short period of time, and because of the virus, a lot of people are using this kind of technology. I'm working with some people who have never really met their clients in person, but have all done it all through this kind of technology, because their clients can't afford to take a trip to where they have to meet.
All right, great. I'm going to wrap us up because we're over time. Thank you all for participating. I really, really appreciate it. Next week, we are live in the afternoon, so we've got a half-day marketing boot camp that will be webcasting. Feel free to join us there. After that, we're meeting with Michelle Stotz from the University of Minnesota to talk about how a proposed rule change, a change to Rule 5.4 might improve access to justice in rural communities. I posted in my contact information into the chat room there. If you've got any questions, feel free to send me an email. I will forward your questions on to Landon or to John or to whoever needs to get that information. Feel free to contact me at your convenience. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.